Hi, this is Jeff Keamy, and today we are going to talk about what to look for while assessing a hotel property for the very first time. Now, the difference between apartments and hotels is that in the hospitality industry, I think you'll see a lot more consistency in building type and how things are structured as far as the wiring goes. A lot of the time, the wiring will already be pre-existing. Whereas in an apartment complex, you might be starting from scratch, and there are many, many different styles of apartments out there. And that's also true with hospitality, but I've seen a lot less, at least in our client base. A lot of our hospitality properties are very consistent in the way that they look. Your kind of traditional hospitality setting is going to be like a 60-room, 2 or 3 story, like La Quinta. That's going to be a very, very typical structure. Very easy to run those type of networks. What we're going to do here, though, is the first property I'm going to show you, one of our existing clients, is the Best Western here. And this is kind of a unique property. It's set up a little bit different. It's more apartment-like in its setup. But all the wiring was already complete when we got here. So we really just installed access points in the proper units, installed our switch, installed our router. We were good to go. This installation was finished and complete in, I believe it took us 2 days to finish this up. And we had a separate bar area. These are things that you're going to want to look for when you are assessing a property for the first time. Is there a bar area that needs to be provided Wi-Fi? Does the office need the Wi-Fi? Is there a lobby or breakfast area that's going to need Wi-Fi? Building construction, same kind of things that you're going to be looking for in an apartment setting. Building construction. One unique thing that you'll look for inside a hospitality setting, though, is the wiring. Like I've said, wiring in a hospitality a lot of times is already existing, so you can figure out if you're capable of utilizing that wire, if it needs to be replaced. You want to do some tests on it to make sure that proper bandwidth is going through it, or that the pins are lined up properly, things are wired and terminated properly. That way you don't have problems in the long term because of wiring that maybe you didn't have very much control over. So you want to test some of that stuff, make sure things are working. Switches that are existing there, if there's already wiring in place, you'll want to see if those need to be replaced. A lot of times, for instance, in this property, I saw a switch that was like 15 years old, still operational, still working fine, and probably was going to be okay, but probably doesn't really work for us. We want to make sure that these type of failures aren't going to happen. So replacing the switch was routine here, making sure that things were working the way that we want to for the long term. The next thing that we're going to want to look at is another property. So I'm just going to go down the street over here, and we're going to look at this particular hospitality setting. This is a 3-story in some sections. This area right here is 3-story, and the rest is 2-story. It's very similar again to the Royal Sun in that it's an outdoor entrances. The wiring was not existing in this property though, so we had to rewire or run new lines and get things set up there to ensure that things were going to work properly for the long term. So that's that. So I think probably the main thing that you're going to look for in a hospitality setting is the wiring existing. We're going to even go down the street just a little bit further, and we're going to look at this property. And this is another hospitality setting. It's sort of unique in the way that it's set up. And again, very similar, though, to the other ones that we've just looked at. There was no wiring. There was a little wiring already existing here at the property. But this side of the building didn't really have anything of use. Because of how long the run was. To run a wire from the main network room, which was located here, all the way over here exceeds our limits as to how far we can actually run our cable. So we had to figure out a solution on how we were going to get access points over here. And that's part of assessing it for the first time, is figuring out how you're going to get your access points, where you're going to place them, and is it feasible to put them in certain areas, because you do have a restriction on how long you can run your Cat5 line, and that is 100 meters before things start to diminish and can no longer be supported properly. Moreover, it may even be less than that 100 meters depending on the voltage that's actually being put through the line. You'll want to make sure that you're getting your full voltage at the end, so your access points aren't malfunctioning due to improper voltage being delivered to and powering the units. So those are three properties, all in a hotel setting. Very similar, but still kind of unique. Let's look at another one that is a little more traditional. And you'll see a lot of these type of hotels. They're popping up everywhere. So here it is. We've got 3-story, 60 units. Wiring is already done to each of the rooms. The switches were installed. We simply had to make sure that the coverage was perfect throughout the property. We ran a new line up to the roof, and that was pretty much all that we had to do there. So we actually servicing this property too. And the reason we ran the line up to the roof is because we actually interconnected these two buildings, and these buildings were interconnected simply so the employees there can access printers and network resources over a local area network. In fact, this building over here, which is also a hospitality, was interconnected. These three were all together. That way network resources could be shared locally. Can print to different printers, such. So again, we're looking for these type of properties, very standard. Wiring was already there. You're going to look for that. You're going to look for the switches. You're going to try and figure out where you're going to put the access points if additional wiring is needed. Here's another property that we service. Again, this is the same thing. Wiring was already existing. This is another property that we are servicing too. Again, wiring was already existing. We simply had to disperse the internet connection appropriately via cabling that was already there, and assess the current hardware and figure out what needed to be replaced to ensure the long-term support of these networks was going to be successful, and that complaints of internet use was at an all-time low. And again, all these properties were experiencing daily complaints on their internet. And since we've taken over, the complaints are at a minimum, all-time low now, very, very few. And a lot of the time, those complaints that come in aren't entirely things that we can control. Sometimes devices are having trouble. But if there is something that is an issue, we're able to do something. That's kind of what we're here for, is to ensure that things are always working at peak conditions in properties just like this. So in the hospitality setting today, we've assessed two different types of properties. One more unique property, kind of an older building, one that had a pre-existing wiring, and two others that did not have existing wiring, one that had partial wiring, and then these other properties here that all were new builds with the thought of Cat 5 to begin with. So there's wiring existing not only to the access points but to individual rooms if needed. So that's it for assessing a hotel property.